Hi. Uh, Thanks for joining me again for Studio Stories. My name is Rachel. I'm the artist behind the small brand called The Solitary Peach. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and now YouTube. I also have a small Etsy store that I just started. I am featured in some local art galleries, and I also do artist markets. I just started really pushing myself to go out of my comfort zone. So these little studio stories are my way of sharing the behind the scenes. And this week, I wanted to talk about sustainability in my brand and ways that I use my vintage trims and fabrics as they get into smaller and smaller pieces. It's very important to me that I use every scrap that I can. For a long time, I had jars and containers where I'm saving all these things, and they didn't have a purpose. So, as an artist, I'm really enjoying finding them a new job, right? So, this week was unusual because I'm working for this week I was working for small items for a market that I'm doing with my husband. We're doing a little antiques market this weekend, but I wanted to also have some of my small things to try and make connections with people so they can find me for other markets. So one of the things that I worked on this week was AirPod cases. So I wanted to share how I will save pieces of fabric about the size of my hand, and then they will become one of these. So for these little speakers, they're a little AirPod keychain. And this one is an example because I accidentally put two of the wrong buttons on it. But here are some that I will have in my Etsy store. I plan to make them out of all vintage bed sheets. I like to use bed sheets in my garment making, and so this is a good way to use the smaller pieces. I'll have a link below so you can see. And so these are not, that is another important thing to me, that I like to use biodegradable fabrics, and unfortunately vintage bed sheets usually have a little polyester in them. Actually, so do modern bed sheets. So these would be an exception to the rule, the usual rule that I follow. But they're just so cool. You know what I do like about vintage bed sheets is when they come out of the dryer, there's no wrinkles. That is nice. And I'll also tell you that I recently had a dress that I was wearing that was made out of a vintage bed sheet, and I spilled a bunch of stuff on it, and it was totally fine, which was really nice. The stain came out immediately. I loved it, right? I was pretty worried. So that's a nice aspect of wearing vintage bed sheets as a garment. Another thing I like to make is some earrings. So I'm going to take some that I'm wearing out. So this is, oh, the birds are going to start. This is an earring that I make that is a small piece of fabric that I have put onto a piece of cardboard, and then I have a felt backing, and then I just put it onto a little earring clasp. And they're super light. Of course, I can't get it on camera. There we go. They're super light. I don't even notice they're there. I used to, around Christmas time, I was hand sewing all the earrings. And then I realized that that was such a cool detail, but it was taking a lot of my time to create them, and there was some imperfections. So I was trying to figure out a way to get through it a little faster. But I do like this texture aspect, so I may still figure out a way to bring it back. I do like working with my hands and hand sewing. I don't know how many people love it, love Christmas earrings. I do like to wear fun earrings. I think if you're a creative person, it's a easy, quick way to express yourself. Another earring that I make is a backless button stud earring out of vintage fabric. So that is when we get to a piece about this size, if that gives you a good size reference compared to my hand. And then I put it onto a backless button. So I was going to share some of the ones that I like to make. So this would be an example of where I'm looking for fabrics that would, and that line in there is my heat erasable. I haven't erased the line yet. My heat erasable marker, but where I'm looking for fabric scraps that would make a good earring. So I am intentionally looking for thrifted fabric that I know will be a pretty earring. I love to do fruits and vegetables. So here's some tomatoes. Here is some blueberries. And then I also love bugs and little critters. So here is a turtle and a ladybug. And all I have left to do is put the backless buttons onto these, or the studs onto these backless buttons. I also like to use vintage fabrics. So here's a little daisy, and then here's a little rose. I will tell you, as an artist, as if you're looking for something cool to make, the ones with something neat on it sell better than, like, for example, here's a cool 60s print with a little gold in it. Those tend to hang out a little longer until they find the right person to fall in love with them, and I can relate, yeah, I want the earrings with the chickens on them too, more than the cool purple pattern, but that's a way that I can use pieces as they get smaller and smaller, and make them into new things, right? Make them more sustainable. You can take fabric as it gets smaller and then start patching it together to make a longer piece. But then my hesitation is that it's taking more of my time. So it's always going to be time versus cost, and I don't want to price my items so high that then I just have all of them, if that makes any sense, because I guess there is always going to be someone who's okay paying $30 for hand sewn earrings. But I think once you get into so high of a price point, I want my earring probably to be made out of precious metals and diamonds, not fabric. So that is something to consider as an artist, to think about that. Another thing I wanted to talk about is where I source some of my materials. So I have right here, this is a pillow that I just recently thrifted that is completely covered in size 6 seed beads. So what I'm doing is I'm slowly unpicking, as I'm watching TV, picking with my seam ripper, the beads. Here's my cool seam ripper. I'll share this. I call it my magic wand seam ripper. I got this at the local thrift store. There's a wood artist who makes these handles. How neat is that? Anyway, side note, right? So then I'm unpicking the beads and I'm slowly putting them into my little organizer. And then I'm going to take them and use them in my brooch making. Sometimes I like to make small, simple brooches for this local art gallery. They do quite well for me, and they're fun. They're fun to make. That's a part of it. So I don't mind sitting and taking a little bit of a pay cut if I'm making something I really enjoy, I guess. So anyway, that's a way that I this pillow that I'm touching off camera that you can't see, that I source some materials and give them a new life. The pillow is gorgeous as it is. I could totally just leave it as a pillow and use it in my home. I do have a bit of a pillow addiction, and I do find that I thrift a lot of pillows and then keep them because they have cool designs or vintage fabrics. And it's always like, oh, I'm going to use that pillow in this project. And then it turns into, I like it too much, and it gets added to my couch or my, wherever I can put a pillow. So that is something that happens. But this one I bought with the intention. I love the colors. I already have some ideas of ways I can make it and incorporate the colors into some pretty pins. So next week I do plan to talk about some of the dresses I'm making from vintage bed sheets. I did work on those quite a bit this week. But since my focus was on some of the smaller items for that upcoming market tomorrow, I just wanted to share this way that I keep my brand sustainable, which is making the items out of smaller and smaller pieces of fabric and keeping them at an approachable price point. Currently, what I'm currently stewing on is journal covers. So I was looking into journals, not junk journals, not the like Mod Podge paper sewn together. I'm always thinking of ways to incorporate scraps of fabric and make it into something small and functional. So I'm thinking of some kind of journal cover, which I may be workshopping and sharing with you in the future. I hope you enjoyed this little ever-flowing creative brain rambling. I do have notes to try and keep me on track, but once the camera turns on, I can't make any promises, right? I will see you next week in Studio Stories. I'm going to post these every Sunday. Hopefully, more people will slowly find them and be interested in what I have to say or sharing things with me. I will include, I'm not sure if I remembered to mention it. I will include I think it's a Pinterest post on how I found this pattern. I am not the creator of this pattern. It's out in the interweb world. And it's doing pretty well for me sales wise. I think because each one is unique. There's no, I do small batch sewing, so it's not on a massive amount. Thanks. Take care. I will see you next week.